Welcome, welcome, folks. Gosh, it's been a while since I've been the host of the NGPF Speaker Series. Welcome, folks. My name is Tim Ranzetta. I'm the co-founder here at NextGen Personal Finance. Really excited to have as our guest today, Brendan Duebner. I think Brendan and I met a couple years ago at a conference, and frankly, I invited him back because I wanted to learn more about his organization. Because when you're at a conference and you only have like 2-3 minutes on the side to chat. Well, this is the extended Brendan Dubner, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about him. Before we jump in, just some quick housekeeping notes. Again, we'll keep this to an hour. I'll ask questions for about the first 30 to 35, and then we'll open it up to your questions. Feel free to jump in the chat. Let us know where you are joining us from. And maybe, since the subject today is providing financial education to service members, I know David Winfrey is somebody who served, but if you or any family members served in the military, please also share that. Hey, Brendan, welcome to the NGPF Speaker Series.
Hey, Tim. Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, want to start off again thanking you for your service, and we'll dive into that shortly. I like starting from the beginning here, and I think we're imprinted at a very young age with some of the money attitudes and habits that we have. I wonder if you kind of reflect back on your childhood. We're going to go way back here. What are some lessons you picked up around the household?
Yeah, I think I was kind of that weird kid growing up who asked for stocks for Christmas when he was 10. And I think that was partially because, my parents were in business and they watched, I knew what the stock market was. They mentioned it to me when I got money for my birthday and I would refuse to spend it. They'd be like, well, you should invest it. And well, what does that mean? So I think from an early age, I had a good relationship with money driven by the fact that, my parents educated me on it.
Yeah, awesome. Do you remember the first stock you bought?
It was a tranche. It was Coca-Cola because I wasn't allowed to have it. It was Sony because I had a PlayStation and I loved my PlayStation. And it was Google because I just liked the name. And that worked out pretty well.
So have you held them to this date? Because yeah, especially Google. Gosh.
Actually, so that first tranche ended up being what bought my first car.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome. Okay, so you got these lessons at a young age, and probably your parents both being in business probably had something to do with you ultimately getting an MBA at some point. But before we jump into that, yeah, maybe talk a little bit about your undergrad, kind of your interest there. And I always think it's often not apparent to us in the moment, but when we go back and look at the work that you're doing today, kind of help us connect the dots as to how your past has kind of informed your present.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what do I say? Well, so actually in high school, I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to enlist in the Marine Corps. And I don't come from a military family. And frankly, my parents were like, absolutely not. College is mandatory. So then the Marines don't have ROTC, and I did not want to go to a military academy. So I only applied to schools with Army ROTC, and that's how I ended up at Loyola University of Maryland. And there, I'd always been entrepreneurial growing up. I started, me and a friend had a little company in high school called Selling It. And it was like this white glove consignment service. We mostly sold kind of like my mom's old stuff, but other people's stuff too, sometimes. So the two things I knew I liked at that time were business, whatever that means, and the military. So at Loyola Maryland, I majored in international business because I also like traveling, and I did Army RTC, and those two things really shaped my college career.
Yeah. And then you spent some time afterwards. Was it you did a deployment in Afghanistan? Is that right?
Yeah, so I graduated and commissioned as a field artillery officer and went straight to active duty. I was at Fort Sill, Oklahoma for a while for my field artillery school, and then Fort Bragg, North Carolina was my duty station. I ended up deploying to the Middle East, spent some time in Afghanistan, mostly in Kuwait though. And it was there that I really saw, I think for the first time, the impact of personal finance, or frankly, the lack thereof. When I was a brand new second lieutenant, the unit that I joined had just come back from a very heavy combat deployment to Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. And all of a sudden, I was in charge. This 21-year-old, 6 months earlier, I was playing beer pong in college, and all of a sudden, now I'm in charge. But very quickly, I saw that the biggest issues we had weren't anything I was expecting. It wasn't equipment, it wasn't funding, it wasn't anything like that. It was all personnel issues, and 95% of the time I dug into those, it ended up being some kind of personal finance, some kind of money problem. Um, and so, I got with my platoon sergeant, my right hand man, senior enlisted advisor, and I was like, hey, we need to do something about this. And he was like, yeah. So we got with the Soldier Support Center, kind of the Army resources, but they were built for larger unit stuff, not the small platoon, 30 people. So I decided, hey, screw it. We can do this. So every month I'd go to my platoon and I'd say, hey, pick a topic, how to make a budget, how to use the military retirement program, how to buy a car, what have you. And I would go do the high level research, and then I would present it in a way where I would teach the class, but structure it so that my soldiers would get with their first line leaders, their sergeants, their section chiefs, and actually go through their pay stubs, go through their retirement account, go through their credit card statement, whatever the class was about. And we saw that really had an incredibly strong impact, because our soldiers actually listened and paid attention because they're being taught by people that they knew and respected. And it gave me and my subordinate leaders an opportunity to build leadership capital, to really just show that we cared. And because we knew what their goals were, we could help them stay accountable to it and build habits and do all those sorts of things.
Paint a picture for folks, because I think environment has a lot to do with this. Take us to a base and what kind of businesses you might see surrounding a base.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I'll take you to Fort Bragg. The establishments outside of any military base, especially I think Army bases, are used car dealerships, are strip clubs, are bars, are a lot of predatory lending establishment, a lot of places that are designed to try to separate service members, especially young, naive service members, with their money kind of as quickly as possible, to give them as much gratification instantly and then to make them pay for it over time. That's, sadly, you'll find that around any Army base.
And what would be the starting pay for somebody, an 18-year-old who just recently enlisted?
Yeah, so I mean, it gets a little complicated because the pay structure is base pay, which is the same for everybody. So for a brand new private, something around like $20,000 a year, in that range. But then they also get, free housing, healthcare, all that kind of stuff. So it's a little complicated, but if you're just joining the military, you're not rolling in it. Let's just put it that way.
Are there any stories you remember from early on, just about, somebody coming back to you afterwards and just talking about how the classes that you helped organize, kind of the difference it made for them?
Yeah. So I remember very distinctly, there was a soldier I had. His name was Private Lopez. And Private Lopez, he had all the makings of a great soldier. He was young, he was fit, he was, tough, but he was kind of a disciplinary nightmare. He'd been kicked out of multiple other platoons before he ended up in mine, just because he had an attitude problem. And I remember so distinctly, we were going through the budgeting class with my platoon, and in the class, during the class, we found out that Private Lopez was broke. Not surprising, but we found out why he was broke, and the reason he was broke was because he, mindlessly every day would go to the barracks vending machine and just buy, a handful of snacks, and he'd do it over and over and over. He was spending, hundreds of dollars a month on the barracks vending machine mindlessly, and this is, a material amount of his net pay. And when we identified this and kind of talked him through it, you would have thought we saved him $1 million, right? And I think it was, the money mattered definitely, but I think to him it just it's not impossible that this was one of the few times in Private Lopez's life that he has seen people actually kind of care about him. And that went a long, long way. From that moment, never had another disciplinary issue with Private. He actually became one of my best soldiers. So I think I take it as an example of, money problems are the root of the foundation of our life a lot of the times, whether they're good or bad. But I think it's also that, when you help somebody with something as personal as their finances, it can really mean a lot to them.
Yeah, I was going to ask kind of what you felt the impact was on the cohesiveness of the unit, or whether it helped reduce some of the distractions and stress that happen. I mean, it's a stressful enough job, but having financial issues pile on top of it can make it insurmountable.
Yeah, no, from teaching the classes, my platoon saw about a 75% decrease in disciplinary issues, and a huge, immeasurable jump in platoon camaraderie. I mean, it was apparent to the entire battalion that, you know, our unit was just a little tighter, just a little stronger than a lot of the other ones. And what it translated to me as a leader was, those times when we're out in the field, or we're on the 10-mile run or ruck or whatever, and it's just, you get to that point where it's like, I don't want to do this anymore. Getting soldiers to push that next extra level just became that much easier, because they're like, you know what, like, I'm not going to let this group down. I'm not going to let, my leader down. My leader cares about me. I care about this unit. So, um, yeah, definitely had a ton of second and third order effects.
You mentioned budgeting being kind of a key issue. I wonder if there were others that really stood out to you as to what they were most interested in learning about. Because again, as 18-year-olds, they're a step removed from many of these teachers here who are teaching them the year before. But yeah, wondered what topics got them most in trouble, and then what topics maybe were of most interest, not from making mistakes, but from maybe building wealth.
Yeah, I think it depended on the time of the year. Well, so one that was always a hit was, how to buy a car, because the classic military story is you have the private who enlists, is in boot camp, and then is in advanced training, and all of a sudden they show up in their unit, they've got maybe 10, 20 grand in their bank account. They think they're the richest person on earth. And then they go out, they buy the brand new Mustang or Camaro or whatever, and they buy it at like 20% interest rate, and they just, they have no idea what they're signing. They're just like, all right, so if I sign this, you're going to give me that car. Done. So that was always a big one. I think another one that would resonate with a number of soldiers is just, basic investing. Like this whole concept of, oh wait, so I can use the money I have to make more money. Like, tell me more about that. And then for soldiers, especially, there's a lot of bonuses in the military when soldiers reenlist. Especially for my unit, I was in a rocket unit, and the Army had a critical shortfall in that. So we'd have, junior soldiers reenlisting for 4, 6, 8 years and getting $60,000 bonuses. And it's at that juncture they're like, huh, like, I wonder what I should do with this. So those are some of the hot topics.
How much, to what extent was your course garnering attention outside of your unit, where suddenly, like, wait, Second Lieutenant Duebner here is not just a great soldier, great leader, but he knows something about money.
Yeah, I think it was definitely garnering attention within the battalion. And so much so that, it's something my battalion commander would call out and be like, hey, if you have money things, go talk to Lieutenant Dubner. And I have soldiers from other units, from time to time come up to me and be like, hey, sir, like, can we talk about this? Can we talk about that? And of course, I think it's an interesting thing, because for a lot of people, it's embarrassing, right? Like if you look at any of the Department of Defense knows this is an issue. And if you look at kind of all their discourse on it, it's the big hurdle is that service members are embarrassed about it, and they're afraid to talk to their chain of command because they're worried about the repercussions of it. Like things like you could lose your security clearance, or you could just be looked down upon, all these kinds of things. So it was definitely kind of, I think, it was known throughout the battalion. And I think if I had stayed at that unit longer, it probably would have spread even more. But I ended up deploying.
Yep. How do they monitor? You brought up security clearance. How are they monitoring? Are they pretty much have carte blanche to check your credit report at any time, or how are they made? Because obviously they do care about, especially those who maybe get in over their head with debt that, oh, suddenly you are a security risk because you're susceptible to bribes.
Yeah, yeah. I think so. If you look at the military, is this thing called TARP, which I'm totally going to butcher it now. It's basically like threat assessment reduction, something like that. And more, I believe I might be wrong here, but I believe the number one predictor of if a service member is going to kind of turn against their nation is money problems. That's like the number one sign. Um, and so I think I totally just lost my train of thought there. But all that to say that this money topics is a huge issue within the Department of Defense, and they know that so much so that in 2016, Congress passed a bunch of bills that mandated that the Department of Defense start teaching these topics to service members, which has been rolling out over the past several years, still rolling out. So it's definitely an important topic.
Yeah, actually, this item in the chat caught my attention, which kind of this idea of it being a taboo topic. How did you find? How did you garner? Obviously, you're a leader, but you still got to garner a lot of trust for people to be talking, especially in a public setting while you're teaching a class. How did you create that safe space?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if we ever fully created it. There's always soldiers who are just like, like not interested, or like I don't need this, or what have you. I think the way we got as far as we did was, you know, I don't know if I could start life skills for soldiers outside of the military, because there really is that bond that I don't know if it exists elsewhere in the civilian world. I think we were able to get as far as we were because of the relationships that were built through training, through going through tough times together, through all that, and just part of the culture of the military of like, look, like we're a unit, we're a team. And so, while you might not think your money problems are going to affect us, like they will, and we need to talk about it. So, I don't know, kind of a mixed bag there.
So, folks on this call may have students interested in the military. What are the best leadership? I mean, as you said, you were 22, 21, 22 years old. 6 months earlier, you were playing beer pong. What are some of the best leadership? I mean, how does the military teach leadership for you to be able to step into that situation? And then I wondered just, what were the most important lessons you picked up along the way in terms of how do you lead people in hazardous, high risk, high trust situations?
Yeah. Well, we could have a
You
much
could write a
longer
book on it, I
discussion on this.
know.
But I think the biggest, if you were to just try to boil it all down, I think what the military teaches on leadership is that it's about just like caring about your people. It's really about kind of intent and action. For example, in the military, I was very fortunate to have some phenomenal leaders, and I was also, to some degree, fortunate to have some not so phenomenal leaders. And an example of how to juxtapose the two is, I had a battery commander who, we'd have to go on these 5-6 mile unit runs, and I had one commander who was like, you guys need to crush this, blah blah blah, but he wasn't there on the run. You know what I mean? And then you have another commander who's like, hey, we're going to crush this. And guess where he was? He was right at the front. So I think my big takeaway, I guess, from the military in terms of leadership is it's all about caring about your people. If you care about your people and you act how you want them to, if you lead by example, the sky's the limit.
Yeah. Awesome. So you leave the military and make a decision to go to business school.
That's right. Yeah. So I
Not the
decided,
traditional path.
yeah, something a little different, I guess. I think so when I was in the military, when I was on deployment specifically, I was in kind of an unusual role for somebody of my rank. So I really got kind of a peek behind the curtain of, okay, if I stay conventional army, this is what my life is going to look like. And it really is about putting the office in officer. And I was like, okay, well, that's a path. Uh, because I was at Fort Bragg, the home of Special Forces, I had a lot of insight into what that looked like. And actually, the guy I deployed directly with was a Special Forces officer. So, over the entire deployment, learned a ton about that, did a bunch of train ups and all of that. And then, there's always this third path of like you can go to business school, whatever that means. My parents met in business school. So I was always like kind of vaguely familiar with it, but I didn't really know what it meant. Um, and on deployment, I came to realize, yeah, I was privy to that we were going to be getting out of Afghanistan. I saw that, things were about to change a lot. And I decided, if I'm going to be in the military, I don't want to be a peacetime officer. So I think it's time for me to get out and do something different and have more control over my life, be able to, you know, find a spouse and not have to move all the time and all the things that come with the military. And so, yeah, I ended up deciding to go pursue my MBA.
And then you leave and decide, yeah, talk about your, current organization, life skills for soldiers.
Yeah. So, Life Skills for Soldiers was born out of my time in the military. So on Life Skills for Soldiers literally started in a park in Barcelona. I was on post-deployment leave, post-deployment vacation, basically. And at this point, I knew I was going to be getting out of the military. I knew I was going to go get my MBA, and I was just reflecting on my time in and the classes that I had taught as a young lieutenant really stood out to me as an inflection point for me personally as a leader. And I was like, you know what, like I've already taken all the time and effort and put together these classes. I could just take all this material that I built, just put it online and so other people could access it. They don't have to recreate the wheel. And that was kind of supposed to be it. I'll raise a little bit of money, start a 501(c)(3), and it'll live there and people can use it or not, whatever. But we got some attention, so we got some money, so we could get some software, so we could track how users were interacting with the product, so we could iterate on it. So we got a board, and things have just kind of snowballed from there, totally unintentionally. I've never thought of myself as a nonprofit guy. I did not go to business school to run a nonprofit. That was like totally never in the cards. But it's just kind of snowballed from there, and it's frankly it's been a phenomenal experience.
Yeah, so talk about the services that you provide. I mean, you've got a pretty good sized team here. I see a VP of marketing, growth and learning and community. Yeah, talk about kind of the services you provide and maybe what's most popular.
Yeah, so we work exclusively with the military. We kind of have two arms, if you will. One is we have all of our course. We build all our courses in house, and we host them on a learning management software. And right now, if you are a military leader, you could go and access the courses completely free and go learn yourself. And then once our model is train the trainer, very much in line with what NGPF does. Once a leader demonstrates that they have an appropriate level of knowledge, we will arm them with everything they need to turn around and teach their people. So presentations, class notes, handouts, all that kind of stuff. And then the other arm of what we do is we work directly with military units to help them kind of stand up financial readiness programs within their unit. So we will work with the commander of a unit. They'll tell us what the financial issues they're seeing are. We'll work with them to set up so that they can choose the appropriate trainers from within their unit. We're not teaching soldiers directly. That is not what we do. There's 100 providers that do that, but we will train that leader, that staff sergeant to captain, get them trained up, and then equip them to teach their troops. And we work with because there's so little data on this. I'm sure you know this well, Tim. We work with an independent third-party researcher. He's former West Point researcher, Harvard PhD. He's a tenured professor at William & Mary. He's the leading expert on personal finance, specifically for the military. And we'll work with him to to measure on the front end, kind of where is the unit at, on the back end where they're at, and show them what changes have occurred, make recommendations on what to do next, all that kind of stuff.
I think I met him. He was at the Stanford conference too, right?
Yeah, Bill Skimmyhorn. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Cool. What kind of results are you seeing?
Yeah, so we just finished. We call them pilots. We finished our fifth pilot a couple weeks ago. For all the pilots that we've done, it's usually between kind of 50 and 200 service members. Um, for all of them, we've seen somewhere between a 10 and 20% statistically significant increase in financial readiness. And that's composed of financial literacy. So, do they know what the right answer is? And then financial health of are they applying that as there have been behavioral changes, are they applying that to their lives? So far, I mean, it's been incredibly successful.
Yeah. So entrepreneurship is a very lonely business. You kind of get started with a vision in mind, and you hope that kind of people both putting a team together, they'll kind of come along as well as customers. I wondered at what point did you feel like you reached that tipping point of like, oh, there is something here, and this thing's gonna be big, and I'm all in.
Yeah, I think I think it was sometime during business school. Like I said, the intent was I'm just gonna take these classes and put them online, and that's just kind of gonna be it. But we got some attention, things just kind of snowballed. And then, I think I've always been kind of a tinkerer. And I think I just started, I was like, well, what if we do this? What if we do that? Well, what if we could reach, maybe 100 more soldiers this way or 1,000 more, this. And I don't want to act like we have arrived because we have absolutely not. We have still many, many hurdles we need to go through. I don't know if anybody's tried working with the Department of Defense, but it is not an easy process. But we're definitely progressing. And I think it was some point at business school that I realized like, all right, I can't just ignore this. Maybe this can't be my full only thing right now, but this is absolutely kind of my passion, and it is something that is more than worth the time investment it's going to take to at least get it to the next level, and then we can decide about the next level and the next and so on.
Keep on chasing it. Yeah, it's interesting. Kind of, you started with just courses, and then you decided, okay, now we're going to get into the leverage game here and train the trainers, and now we know that our effect is going to be kind of even broader. Uh, Anything else that you've learned? I mean, other than, okay, so you put the courses up and then you train the trainer, like maybe other ideas you have, either already implemented or you're kind of like, okay, now, because once you solve one problem, so to speak, you suddenly you're scanning the environment and saying, okay, now where do we plug in next? What problem do we try and solve next?
Yeah, I think there's 100 that we're constantly trying to address. I think I'll touch on two real quick. I think one is the gamification piece, like just the power of gamification. The more you can make it like bite-sized, fun, show progress, like the just you're gonna have a lot more success. So I think just constantly trying to figure like how can we do better at that, especially with limited resources. And then I think the other the other big one we're trying to figure out now for us personally is how can we work with the military, like how can we remove the barriers to make it as easy as possible for units to work with us, because one of the things that we've definitely seen is every single time without fail, every single time we show up to a unit, they're like, oh god, more mandatory training, more like, oh, like check the box, we just have to do this stuff. And nobody's excited to see us. But then, we go through the first course, the first iteration, they're like, wait, like that was that was actually pretty cool. Like that was actually pretty helpful. For the leaders, they're like, wow, like my soldiers actually were pretty engaged. That was pretty. And the soldiers are like, wow, like I actually kind of learned something, and I want to know a little bit more. So I think it's been imperative for us to realize like we kind of have to go top down. The more you can get the buy-in from the commander who can just push it through in the beginning, the more success you're going to have. And we're just trying to figure out like, all right, how do you get that buy-in? How do we remove hurdles? How do we just smooth the process?
Yeah, how difficult have you found it to find the trainers in the units? In other words, are they being voluntold, okay, you're going to go attend this training, and you face a lot of the same things like, oh, another responsibility. And then I wonder if you see the same transformation in them where it's like, oh, like this is cool. Like I can use this in my own life too.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Sometimes we work with units, and they're like, okay, we're gonna have all of our platoon leaders do this, or we're gonna have all of it's based off of what position somebody is in, right? And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. We always are an advocate for kind of flexibility. So like we're like, yes, is teaching at the platoon level appropriate? Like we really like teaching at the platoon level, but saying like the platoon leader is going to be the person, how about just somebody within the platoon? Because what we found is like there's always somebody. There's always somebody who has the background, who has the experience, who has the interest, who wants to, who's excited about it. Maybe it's one of the 30, but there's always the one.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the real strengths I think of our model is that we're not here to tell you how to do it. We're here to kind of give you the best practices and help guide you along. But it's really the people within your unit who are going to make it happen and who are best equipped to do so.
How do you stay optimistic when, again, I see a lot of analogies here where you've got a successful program, the data shows for the military, hey, this is really good for combat readiness. I mean, right? Financial readiness, combat readiness, there's a link there, right? Having folks not stressed out and worried about money issues. And yet it's not going at the pace. Like you have to fight all these hurdles. And I know educators feel the same way. Many who teach an elective course, like I want more sections or I want this for all of my students. This makes a lot of sense. Come visit my classroom. Look at the impact. How do you, yeah, maybe what are the most creative solutions you've come up with to overcome those hurdles and recognizing there isn't one size fits all here and it's just probably an ongoing battle. No pun intended.
I think it's just facing it as like an iterative problem. Like, okay, like we're gonna get a little bit further. We're gonna run into. We know there's another hurdle. I don't know what it is, but I know we're gonna hit it. And then hitting that hurdle and realize, okay, like we've learned a little bit more. Also, now we have a little bit more credibility. Who can we bring into the team? Really, for us, it's been who can we bring onto the board now that we've shown kind of this next level of validation, so that when we run into the next hurdle, like the team's a little bit stronger. And it's just been that kind of over and over. And don't get me wrong, it can be demoralizing. Like if you ask business school Brendan, like, oh, how hard do you think this is going to be? He would be like, oh, it's not going to be easy, but like, yeah, it makes sense. It just like it intuitively makes sense. How hard could this be? It could be very hard. But I think it's just all about like realizing taking every little bit of advance as a way to kind of like consolidate your position, get a little bit stronger, and so that knowing that it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Sounds like military strategy.
Yeah, something like that.
Consolidate your gains.
Yeah.
Build your army, consolidate your gains, and keep progressing forward. Let's shift gears a little bit. I didn't realize you have something else, another side hustle going on. Maybe want to talk a little bit about something that's become something I was actually involved with informally 30 years ago that has become a lot more popular for business school grads. Maybe talk a little bit about search funds, what they are, and kind of, yeah, what you're in the process of doing.
Yeah. So search funds is this kind of they've been around for a while, but they've gotten much more popular as of late. Uh, Basically, young B school grads like me will go out and look for a business to buy, and then once they buy it, they'll step in as CEO and operate it. And there's a couple different models to do it. There's what's called funded search. You can raise money and you're getting paid the whole time, but then you own less of what you buy, or there's unfunded where nobody's paying you, but then you have a lot more flexibility. I'm doing what's known as an unfunded search. And yeah, I think it's I don't know, maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment or something, but it's not easy, but it's definitely, I don't know, a lot of fun constantly learning and everything. And what I've found is the two things kind of complement each other nicely in terms of, life skills is not enough in its current state to fill my time all the way. And same thing with search, like not enough currently to kind of fill my time all the way. So they've played off each other nicely.
Yeah, so we did an unfunded search. Yeah, and then found a business and then found investors. But again, that was unusual back in the day. And it was a really exciting Silicon Valley. No, not really. It was a document shredding business. So we referred to it as white collar trash hauling, but good business, good business. Hey, folks, I'm going to open it up to questions. So questions you have for Brendan about the military, about providing financial education to them, anything in his about business school, about buying a business. Maybe you can, Cassandra had a question wondering if search funds were like Shark Tank.
Um, uh, Not really. Not really. No, I think, Shark Tank is much more like kind of like VC funding, if you will. Search funds are more of like, showing up and be like, hey, Bob, you've got a great plumbing business here. Have you ever thought about selling it? Oh, you have? Like, okay, let's talk about it. Let's try to put a deal together. I'm going to come work with you for a while and then, and I'll learn the business and take the reins. So, I'd say a little different, but not 100% dissimilar.
So looking to buy, oh, I'm sorry, go.
Oh, hi, I am Delvon Curry. I am right here in Fayetteville, North Carolina, right next door to Fort Bragg. Everything that he said is so true. And I'm just like, yes, this is we got. We have more car dealerships now, probably since you've been here. And they do a lot of preying on the young soldiers. And the young soldiers do want to look good when they get that bonus. So you got the cars, and I'm like, oh yeah, you live in the barracks, and you're buying a car, and as soon as you drive it off the lot, it loses value. So I'm thinking all this, but the young soldiers do need that help. And I put something in the chat box that I worked with a university where I was like an academic counselor. So one of our satellite places was on Fort Bragg. That's when it was open. It was more open then. And I would deal with the soldiers coming in that want to go to school with the tuition assistance and all of that. So I would do their financial aid papers. Well, a part of that financial aid papers would, if they're getting food stamps or some kind of funding from social service, it would be on there. And what I found is that it was a lot of soldiers that you would not even know that they're trying to take care of their families. They're living paycheck to paycheck. And I didn't realize it until I started doing their paperwork. And I said, oh my goodness, he's got 4 kids. They're getting food stamps and he's in the military serving. And I just couldn't get it. And I think it's such a great thing that what you're doing for the veterans. Of course, we have a high population of disabled vets here too. So I was wondering, I'm a teacher, and so some of my students are going into the military. They have no clue. To them, it's their way out of poverty. It is almost like a guarantee, and they want to get out of their community. Now, learning how, I don't know if a club could be started. Do you do speaking engagements to high school RTC programs? Because I think what you're doing, those students that are, and I may have had maybe 6 RTC students that were in my class, but if you could hit the masses going through the RTC programs, well, because 9 times out of 10, they're going to go into the military, or either they're going to go to college and go through the RTC program. But understanding that money and how it works early on, I don't think they're getting that. They're not getting it. They make it a requirement here in North Carolina now to take the class, but it depends on if you get a good teacher or not, to be honest with you. They still may be lost. And it might be a requirement for North Carolina to graduate. And I was just sitting here thinking, I said, it'd be great if you could get into RTC programs and work with them to get a program started or even a club for the ROTC students so that they'll know when they go in, not to go in blind. Just a question I'm throwing out there. Is that something that you would consider doing, or do you already do it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, throwback, Fayetteville. Oh man, definitely spent a lot of time over there.
Yeah. Hay Street, does that sound familiar? Hay Street.
Yep, yep. Definitely familiar with Vietnam, as they say.
Yep, Vietnam. Got it. Vietnam. It's AKA is now Fort Liberty. Change the name.
Yeah,
Black.
yep, yep, yep. So working with ROTC units is something that we have absolutely looked at, and frankly, it's something we're trying to figure out. The material that would go towards teaching a JROTC or an ROTC student is definitely different than it would be for an active duty or reserve National Guard soldier. But it is, something that we definitely want to tackle, because I totally agree. I think, what's better than getting service members when they're in the unit, getting them before they show up. These are habits that we want people to build over time, and the reason we want people to have good finances is, we want them to have a good foundation and all of that. But candidly, like, this is why I have so much respect for all of you and for NGPF, because I think you all are really fighting the good fight. I mean, when I was when I was first doing that research on this topic and kind of formalizing all the things I anecdotally knew, it struck me how few states it was either mandatory or even optional to take these kinds of classes, and I know that number has been growing exponentially, and it's because of the work that all of you have been doing. So to answer your question, we don't currently really work with ROTC. We're trying to figure out how to do so, and right now we're really leaning on the people like you, the high school education system to try to make it better.
The DPI, the state level, will regulate the courses that are needed. And I think that would be, if you haven't looked at that, like ours would be North Carolina Public of Instruction. They're the ones that drive that, what is required, maybe starting at that peak, and then it should filter down, in my mind. Just want to throw that out there. I know other people that got questions. Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Great question. Great question. Okay, I've got some people lined up here. So let me just we're going to go David, and then it looks like we're going to go Sandra, Barbara, and Raquel. Okay, David, you're on.
All right, good. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, good. So I'm the financial advisor at Fort Sam Houston for two organizations, the Soldier Recovery Unit, which was the Wounded Soldier Battalion, and I work at the Vogel Resiliency Center. And so I give briefings to everyone who is in a medical board, and I also give an in-processing briefing to everyone who comes on Fort Sam. So what the Army is currently doing, the Office of Financial Readiness has a network of personal financial counselors. This is a contract. So they're from Magellan, and so their job is to go out and pound the pavement. I am not a contractor. I'm a government employee. And so I pretty much also try to reach as many people as I can. The key to what we do, and everybody's certified, we're all accredited financial counselors. I have an MBA also. And then when I talk to people mostly about budgeting, goal setting, and investing, probably in that order. And so, let me say that the Army has changed how they're teaching finance. So before, you just got your 2024 financial brief. That's no longer true. The Army wants you to get a financial briefing when you enter the Army, but if that one is too much information in 1 week, right? It's fire hose. So the fact that you got that, good, you got your hand stamped, you don't remember. It's like going to a bar. But then you should get a briefing when I give the PCS briefing, and I give the continuing the illness briefing when you get discharged. But in between, you're supposed to get a financial briefing per event. So if you get married, you're supposed to have it. You get divorced, you have it. You get a kid, you're supposed to have it. You qualify for the bonus pay, you're supposed to get it. And so they're trying to go much more event driven. And that's really only in the second year. So we went from 3% had gotten the classes to now we're probably up to 30%, which is still not that much, but a tremendous focus in 1 year has made a difference. So I do want to talk about, I mean, I did come to this specifically to say the Army is doing more financial education than we might get credit for. And so, yes, it depends on the instructor that you get, certainly. But the concept of having it by life event, that's a good thing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think the progress that the Army and Department of Defense as a whole has made with the Office of Financial Readiness, with setting out the what should be taught at different posts of a service member's career. Totally. I mean, even just from, you know, I got off active duty in 2020, not that long ago, and it has definitely improved even since then. But I think, you know, where we try to help is we think having financial counselors on base is a phenomenal thing. But from, you know, from at least from my experience, you know, at Fort Bragg when I was there, there were 6 financial counselors for the entire base. To try to get an appointment with one of them was like a 6-week wait time. I mean, it was just unbelievable. We think that, you know, by bringing in those junior leaders, those first line leaders, we can not only help soldiers because they're getting kind of that really personalized attention, but it's really about, you know, we're not trying to turn anybody into experts. We're not teaching you how to price options, what Black-Scholes theory is, all that kind of stuff. We're trying to teach the very, very, very basics that can reduce, you know, 90% of the issues that are burdening a lot of these financial counselors and making the wait time so long and making it so that we want to make it. We want to it's kind of like healthcare, where there's appropriate levels of care, right? There's the really basic stuff that your first line leader, when equipped with the right information, can help you with. And then there's the more serious stuff where like, hey, you know, let's get you to the financial counselor who, by the way, can see you tomorrow, not in next month. But totally agree. I think the military has been making great progress, and also hats off to the financial counselors. I know several who are excellent. And, you know, we're just trying to help, you know, be part of the team.
Awesome. Yeah, I was just in DC. I think there's a bill circulating in the Congress that would require personal finance at the DoD schools, the DoD high schools, which is kind of interesting. So not only are the states, individual states taking it up, and we're up to 25 now, 53% of kids, but we're starting to see at the federal level some initiatives. All right, let's go to Sandra, Barbara, and Raquel. Sandra, you are up.
Hi, you guys just gave me the perfect segue, I think, to my question, which is I was wondering, in this age of technology, if you've thought about maybe offering an online live helpline, you know, for soldiers to ask their day-to-day questions. You know, it'd be more anonymous, and, you know, you could maybe vet volunteers. I'm not too far from retirement, and so I'm starting to look for opportunities to volunteer, and so that's part of what's, you know, prompting my question. But there are obviously urgent financial questions that people have, and, you know, waiting a month is not really very helpful.
Yeah, no, you know, I think that's a phenomenal idea. Frankly, one of the things we've been trying to get better at is when we work with units, we try to we try to set it up in a way where leaders always have access to, you know, even if it's just using Calendly to set up a time on Zoom to talk to a financial counselor if they're ever kind of stuck on a concept or what have you. I think, long story short is, you know, we have not looked into what you've mentioned yet, but I agree. I think it could be a great idea and a great way to just, you know, help service members, and a way for service members to get help on demand, you know, to bring all this into 2024 and out of, you know, the 90s. So I think that's a phenomenal idea. I'm actually, I might steal it.
There'll probably be an AI angle to it also, if you could, you know, if you could teach it based on common set of questions over time. You could even, not to say we'd automate it, but you'd have, kind of you might have a human there, and then they'd be able to tap into this database, because there's a lot of one-off type questions they can probably expect. All right, Barbara.
Okay, well, you actually answered my first question in response to David's question, about the military touch points and the PFMs on the installations. But I was just curious if you've connected with Mill Money Con yet, the conference for military financial content creators.
Yeah, so I'm familiar with the conference. Of course, Lacey Langford is the one who started it. I've been on her podcast. I think the work her and her team does is also excellent. All this, even back when I was in the military, nobody talked about personal finance. Like that was totally just like not part of the vocabulary at all. And now it is very much so with people like Lacey Langford, people like Jay Lai, people like that. I think that, frankly, I think one of the things we could all do better as a community is figure out how to work together better. Because right now it's kind of like, we have some people going this way, we have people working on a conference here. We have us, trying to do more software and train the trainer, and you have other people doing all these other things. So I think we could do a better job of trying to figure out how to work together, and all trying to figure out how we could work with the Department of Defense. But to answer your question, definitely familiar with the work that she's doing and those folks are doing, and totally, on board with it. I think the big difference I would say is with a lot of the Mill Money Con folks, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out like a systematic, organizational like how do you deal with this at the enterprise level, where I found that a lot of the other kind of military personal finance folks are doing it at more of the onesie twosie level, which is I think also great, but it's just trying to solve the problem in different ways.
All right, Raquel, you've been so patient.
Thank you. I was just wondering, I know at our JROTC, they do a lot of stuff, which is really great. One of the things that I saw is they have a scholarship for the student. Is it possible to work with whoever's giving the scholarship for the students to then maybe have some part of that money in investment so they can learn about compound interest, especially when it starts so young, but helping them to manage their money almost in a scholarship when they're first starting out, graduating from high school from JROTC.
Yeah, that's it. I have no idea about the legalities of all that kind of stuff, but I think when I was growing up, I one of the Tim asked me about my parents, kind of my relationship with money. One of the best things I think they ever did was, I do my chores or I do whatever work. Be like, okay, well, you can either get $10 now, or if you can wait a month or 2 months, you'll get $15. And I was always the kid like, wait as long as you want, like no problem. Let's rack up that interest, whatever that is. Whereas my sister was always like, I want it now. I want it now. I want it now. So I totally agree. I think the earlier in life that we can get people to understand compound interest, delayed gratification, all these things, the better off we'll be. Which again is, hats off to all of you folks. I think you're the ones who more often than not are probably the first ones who are exposing kids to these really life-changing concepts, even outside of money. I think that would be a great idea. I have no idea how implementable that is, but I'm on board.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that, Raquel. Thank you all of you for your questions. Brendan, I want to give you the last word here. You've got a room full of high school high school, middle school, maybe some college, as well as nonprofit personal finance teachers. Lead them on their way.
Yeah, no, I think at the end of the day, all of us, even though maybe we're in separate niches or what have you, we're all going after the same thing. I think we've all probably in our lives been exposed to just how powerful personal finance can be. And I really, again, like just I'm honored to be a small part of this much, much larger team that's trying to change how our society looks at money and change it at as young of an age as possible. So, yeah, I feel free to reach out at any time. The entire team at Life Skills for Soldiers, we work only with the military, but we are big believers in, I think, the same kinds of things that all of you are. So, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, Brendan, thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you get a chance to read the chat here. I'm going to echo Brooke and thank you for your service, for identifying what an important gap in how we serve, those in the military. And thank you for taking this on. And let's have you back again, because your progress is to hear more about this as you progress.
Yeah, I'd love to come back anytime.